Hello and welcome to the second episode of CERA webinars developed by DMT Group and supported by ET Raw Materials. My name is Knut Hirsch. I'm Head of Communications at DMT Group and I'm your moderator today. After the presentation of the entire CERA Sustainability Certification System in our previous webinar, today's focus is on the theory of the CERA Performance Standard, which focuses on upstream mine operations, processing and refining. We will dive into the structure, rules and requirements of the performance standard and see how the implementation details are designed to deliver a certification approach that fits to the individual environment, capabilities and needs of the companies who apply the performance standard. The practical application of the standard will be introduced in the next episode in January. Today's speakers is Lukas Förster. Here he is. Hello, Lukas. He's a risk assessment specialist and he has been an essential driving force behind the development of the performance standard. Lukas is accompanied by Andreas Hucke on the right-hand side and Nadine Kohl, who's responsible for scheme development, and Andreas is the project director of CERA. This brings me to an important organizational point. Your questions are highly appreciated. However, the dynamics of this webinar is limited. So please post your questions into the chat at the end or during the webinar, and I will read them out on your behalf at the end of the webinar in our discussions. That's it so far. Now we start with the presentation. Lukas, it's on you. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much for your introduction, Knut. We will start today with the introduction of the CERA Performance Standard. I hope everybody can see the screen. I will give you an overview about the CERA system at all, the introduction, then focusing on the CERA Performance Standard, talking about the implementation details, then parts of the disclosure for the CPS, the certification process of CPS, the harmonization process for CPS, and as well as the ASM and recycling approach within our performance standard. And I will end up my presentation with the milestones and give you the contact for the CERA project. Starting with the CERA overview. So for everybody which is very new in the project, the CERA project is supported by ET Raw Materials and started in 2017. And within the project, the standardized certification scheme for raw materials will be developed, and it will ensure environmental, social, and economic sustainability for raw materials through the entire value chain. And we also guarantee traceability of certified materials by using a combination of traceability methods within our CERA chain of custody standard. A quick overview: CERA closes the gaps by being a holistic certification scheme at all with 4 standards. It's applicable to the entire value chain. It's working on global scale for all mining-related operations and all size of operations, as well as for all raw materials. It tries to harmonize the standard market and introduce mechanism to ensure reliability in the chain of custody, as well as it's applicable to organization internal processes and therefore reducing the efforts for certification or for organizations which are looking for certification. Now the CERA introduction. We are having at first 2 different documents, starting with the manual, which is an overview about the principles, the structure, the roles, the certification accreditation work, as well as the review and revision process of the standard system. Then, one step below, the different substandards and the assurance documents. The substandards are classified in general rules and requirements, which are very generic, subdivided in the environmental social responsibility and the corporate governance topic, And the assurance document is the traditional assurance document, which is mandatory or which sets out mandatory rules for the performance of certification activities. Here we have our 4 substandards, which are building on each other, but which are focusing on different steps or different areas on the value chain. We're starting with the value chain in general. We have the process step on top from the exploration to the consumption, as well as the output value chain from the deposit to the end product. There we include the recycling streams as well. And we are starting with the CERA Performance Standard, which is the focus of today's webinar. The CERA Performance Standard, including the mining, processing, refining part of the value chain. And the next standard will be the CERA Chain of Custody Standard, which includes the run of the mine, the concentrate, and the raw material. So the flow, the flow of the raw materials through the value chain. Our third standard is the CERA Readiness Standard, which includes the exploration and deposit step of the value chain, the greenfield step, which is linked to the pre-investment steps and feasibility steps of mining projects. And at least the CERA Final Product Standard, which includes the end product, the labeling of the end product. We are concentrating today, as I mentioned before, on the CERA Performance Standard, so on the mining, processing, refining part of the value chain. The CERA, we have 2 different versions. Right now, today we are talking about the revised version of CERA Performance Standard, which is more or less ready. The CERA Performance Standard certifies a facility or sequence of operations and defines a set of minimum criteria which every operation in the upstream supply chain has to fulfill. And the individual aspects of the mine, of the operation size, of the local regional conditions, etc., are taken into account in so-called implementation details. But step by step. The review process of the CERA Performance Standard was started in the mid of this year. We got the last feedback this week and the last week, and having all implemented together in the CERA Performance Standard 1.0. The changes that have been made during the CPS revision process was more or less that we add different new chapters, talking about the overview, the structure, the rules and requirements, the implementation details, and hazards and risks chapters. You see all the blues, which we are focusing in the next slide: structure, rules, requirements, implementation details, hazards, and risks. This is a typical overview, or this is our overview of the CERA Performance Standard, which includes the topics and themes. We have the environmental and social responsibility, as well as the corporate governance topic. And for the different topics, we have different themes to further define the topics. For example, we have in social responsibility, the human community rights, the labor conditions, occupation, health and safety, or in environmental responsibility, biodiversity, mine closure, as well as in corporate governance, supply chain due diligence as well. Here you have the further defined key aspects. That means every single theme is further defined by different key aspects to have a set of sustainability in the CERA Performance Standard. We have in total 43 different key aspects related to the different themes. Here you have the example of the social responsibility part. We have child labor and education, land rights and disputes. We have working hours and conditions. We have within the occupation health and safety, measures to ensure workplace safety. We have maintenance of structures, access to operation safety and security, and environmental responsibility. We have energy and material consumption, biodiversities, water, air, waste, greenhouse gas emissions. And in corporate governance, for example, we have the stakeholder engagements, the corruption, bribery issues, the including international guidelines, etc., etc., etc. Now we're having the topics, the themes, and the key aspects. And every key aspects, like a traditional standard, is set with or is defined by rules and requirements. We have for every single topic, every single theme, have different rules and requirements. And the rules are strict criteria which are used as a general criteria that has to be fulfilled for CERA certification. And this is based on the fact that CERA is intended to be a core standard, and organizations can follow other additional standards to fulfill the rules. But however, and this is really important, to get the CERA certificate, the CERA requirements need to be fulfilled. And the CERA requirements itself are core requirements as well to meet the CERA standard, and it's the information how to implement the rules into practice. Just giving you an example, when we are looking to stakeholder involvement, which is the theme, we have in blue the CAMD on the left side, which I will pick up in the next slides, as well as we have in yellow or orange the policy and the different key aspects. So we're starting with the organization shall develop and implement a policy. Then we are starting with the organization shall perform a due diligence process. We are following with that, the organization shall identify key performance indicators to measure its performance against these key aspects. And at the end, the organization shall disclose the key performance indicators and its progress against these. Maybe one of you see that this is a structure that you know from ISO or OECD, but I will pick that at a later stage. So talking about the CAMD structure, what we saw on the slide before on the left side, that means we have, this is developed by CERA, and it's comparable to the ISO approach, plan, do, check, act, as well as the OECD 5-step management approach. And it facilitates both understanding and applicability of the requirements. And what CAMD means is that we commit, or the organization shall commit itself. It shall conduct an assessment process. It shall monitor this assessment process and then improve and disclose this monitoring, the commitment, assessment, monitoring, and improvement and disclosure part. What you see here in yellow, the policies and key aspects, are the content of the CERA Performance Standard, which is crucial to know for the implementation details at a later stage. The implementation details. So we are having right now, this is the slide, what you see before, the third hierarchy step, the implementation details, which are belonging to the different substandards. And within the implementation details, it's a detailed information on how the requirements are implemented for the specific case of the organization, considering the raw material, the mine site, the operation site, the geographical situation, etc., etc. What we see here. So the CERA implementation details follow the same structure as the CERA Performance Standard. It's situation specific and individual for every organization. Like as I mentioned, operational scale, raw materials conditions, geographical locations, mining and processing methods, and it follows as well the commitment, assessment, monitoring, improvement, disclosure structure. That means this we will see here the CERA implementation details in comparison to the CERA Performance Standard. We have here on the left side the commitment, assessment, monitoring, disclosure steps. We have in the middle the CERA Performance content with the policies and key aspects, which are located there. And within the implementation details content, we have for the risk, for the assessment, and for the different key aspects, a risk identification and assessment process. We have for the monitoring step, different key performance indicators, and we have for the improvement and disclosure part, different improvement plans and disclosure plans for the different key performance indicators. So this is a hierarchy from the top to the bottom. what means risk identification assessment process within the implementation details. So for every single key aspect, a risk identification assessment, that means prevention and mitigation process, need to be conducted. During this process, it will be considered the operational scale, the raw materials conditions, the geographical location, the mining and processing methods. Following to the different risk identification assessment processes, we have the key performance indicators. So every identified and assessed risk needs to be monitored by key performance indicators. And furthermore, the organization shall disclose the progress against these key performance indicators and develop a plan how to improve its progress. How we develop the situation-specific implementation details. Therefore, we developed the CERA software, which will be used during the audit process to digitalize the process in future. So the CERA software is already including a set of identified risks. We implement a lot of scientific work there for cobalt, copper, iron, lithium. Now we are starting with graphite, raw earth elements. So we have a risk assessment for all these raw materials already done, and put all these identified risks into one software. That means, and also developing corresponding prevention plans, how to prevent and mitigate this risk, which are very optional. So that means you cannot develop a prevention plan for every single risk, because it's in every time very individual for the operation, for the process. That means these prevention plans can be used for the auditor to know a bit where to look at, and for the organization who has no idea how to prevent this risk, which is very new for them. We also develop the key performance indicators for the different risks, as well as giving improvement plans how to improve this progress against these. So there's already a huge set of risks with prevention plans, KPIs, and improvement plans already set in the CERA software. And when we are looking to the audit process, the auditor and the company select the risks for the specific situation from this software. And when there are individual risks that, for example, very individual process steps, very individual chemicals which are implemented there or which are used there, these can be added within the CERA software by the auditor. But, and this is very mandatory, the decision about the adoption of this risk will be done by CERA or the CERA association at the end. So CERA decides whether this risk will be added to this software or not. And the benefit of this CERA software is that it will grow continuously. With every project, the CERA software will be validated, as well as will grow by time. So we have right now the identified set of risks which are very specific for the situation. These risks, or this selection of risks, will be verified by independent CERA organization or the CERA party to avoid that something is missing. For example, to avoid that the auditor is the best friend with the mining operation as well, or something else. So we decided to have this third-party system there that CERA decides about the identified risks, which go through the CAMD structure, through this whole certification process, through this whole systematic of CERA Performance Standard. So we have the verified risks right now. We have the optional prevention plans, and then we got the key performance indicators and the improvement processes, which are linked to the identified risks. These are basis for the assessment steps, as well as for the further certification process. So this is the basis for certification, the verified risks and the identified risks. The organization has also fulfilled these developing prevention plans, mitigation plans, developing key performance indicators, as well as developing improvement plans for these newly identified risks. So the CMD structure belongs to the already identified ones, as well as for the new identified ones. When we are looking at the, very fast. When you're looking at the disclosure part, so we have two different consultation processes for the implementation details or the content of the implementation details. We have, on the one hand, the public. It is planned to share our key aspects and related to these aspects, the identified risks. Then recommendations can be made if some fields of risk are missing. We further decided to have relevant stakeholder. That means we share the key aspects with related risks as well as the corresponding key performance indicators to validate them regarding the feasibility in practice. The prevention plans are optional, as I mentioned, can be used as support for the auditor. So the prevention plans are not so crucial for the further process, but it is crucial to share our KPIs, our key performance indicators, and our risks to validate them and to look where we miss something. Certification. This is a typical mine site assessment from our pilot projects right now. So we have the organization and we have the CERA team. The CERA team is here in blue, the organization in brown. I think it's brown. We're starting with the initial meeting at every single step. That means we are talking about the CERA Performance Standard. We are talking about the CERA system, the goals, the scope of certification, etc., etc. Then we're having the CERA questionnaire, which is a document for kind of self-assessment of the organization. And within this CERA questionnaire, all the key aspects which are deposited in the CERA Performance Standard, the 43 ones, are further defined and described in the CERA questionnaire. And then the organization can use these key performance indicators to conduct a self-assessment, what they already have implemented or what they do not have implemented. After the initial meeting, the CERA team will develop the gap analysis report based on the self-assessment within the CERA questionnaire. So CERA is analyzing all the evidences which are made for the different key aspects in the CERA questionnaire and will conduct a theoretical gap analysis where a theoretical conformity exists or not. Then we go through the internal setup. That means the organization needs to compile information which are made in the CERA questionnaire. So they are receiving the gap analysis, look where to add some documents which are missing in the first round, and send them to CERA to finalize the gap analysis report. Sometimes due to COVID not, but sometimes there's also a pre-on-site visit to look at the conditions on site, to modify the CERA a little bit, which is in the next step. So we harmonize the existing process with CERA performance requirements. That means if there are already processes implemented regarding different key aspects, we use them, we recognize them as evidences. Sometimes there are risks there are key aspects which are not belonging to the organization. They can be deleted by giving a description why we are deleting them. And then the following steps are following the traditional audit approach. So the pre-audit will identify missing CERA requirements in the cooperation with CERA team. So we support the CERA team at any time. The next step will be the traditional pre-finding report about the minor and major non-conformities. Going through the correction action phase 1, so the organization adjusts documentation as well as assess and monitor of non-conformities, monitoring and assessment of non-conformities. Then the traditional on-site audit will be conducted with a finding report to control the implementation and functionality of developed management system, as well as the evaluation of compliance with CERA Performance Standard. And at the end, the correction action phase part 2 to adjust and close findings. And then the certificate will be issued by the CERA organization. The CERA certification follows a step-by-step approach and using, on the one hand, the traditional approach, but also the dynamic certification. That means the identified risks, which are where we talked about at the earlier stage, the identified risks during the audit process are categorized in core, priority, and supplementary risks. The core and priority risks need to be addressed following the CAMD structure for the first certification. That means the core risks are not non-specific. That means it's very general. It's located to the regional or geographical situation, as well as non-specific to the raw material, non-specific to the mining type. The priority risks are very specific for the mine or processing or refining methods which are used, for the specific for the raw material, etc., etc. And both of these are the entry criteria for CERA certification. That means the entry criteria are criteria which are the CERA, which have public awareness, which etc., etc. So these are the entry criteria for CERA certification. And then we have the supplementary risks that needs to be addressed until the follow-up certification. The supplementary risks could be both specific and non-specific, and these are defined by, for example, that you need a prolonged period for implementation, that issues in the community which needs time to implement, training requirements, etc., etc. So all these complex criteria which needs time for implementation. And these are categorized in supplementary criteria risks, and after the first certification process, you need to fulfill them for the follow-up certification. The CERA Performance Standard, or these implementation details, are right now piloted in four different projects. We have in Europe 2 projects for lithium and graphite. The lithium project is both an exploration project and a smaller mining project. The graphite is a running mining project. Then we have also in China and Asia, the raw element project. This is a certification of a complete value chain of raw earth elements, as well as cobalt in Africa, which is also a running mining project. So we have different regions, various raw materials, different mining systems, different company sizes, and different stages of development right now within our pilot certification sites. When we are looking at the harmonization of the CERA Performance Standard with already existing standards out there, one objective of CERA is to contribute to the harmonization and mutual recognition within the certification landscape. This will be done by 3 different steps. The first step, that we included the CAMD structure in CERA to adopt the 5-step management approach of OECD, as well as the PDCA approach of ISO. Here you have on the right side the commitment, assessment, monitoring, improvement, and disclosure structure, what you have seen before as well. So this facilitates the implementation of already existing standards out there, or newly developed standards out there, or in guidelines, which are also based on this OECD or ISO approach. The second step is that CERA recognize already existing internal processes and setups during the audit process to reduce the effort of organization. So, for example, if an organization has already an occupational health and safety risk assessment, and workplace safety assessment, etc., etc., we will recognize them doing the audit for our risk assessment or our assessment processes. And there you have the modification of the implementation details for the certification. The last step is that CERA has developed an objective standardized framework to harmonize with and recognize already existing certification standards out there. So we have a set of already existing standards out there, and within the same CERA framework, we have specific evaluation parameters which are mandatory for the cross recognition. If a standard has recognized or have implemented these parameters, it will be recognized by CERA during the audit process. But, and this is also very crucial, the mutual recognition of internal and external processes or standards, so the topics, the both points on the top, will be done by recognizing them as evidences for CERA requirements. So if an organization has already these systems in place, they can use them as evidences for CERA requirements, and the auditor will decide whether this is feasible or this is enough or not. And maybe one information more, every single key aspect, every single risk assessment needs to be done to fulfill all the requirements. So nothing can be deleted by having another standard, and everything will be controlled at the end. But you can use them as evidences to check whether this is conform or not with CERA requirements. Now we are looking at the ASM and recycling part in the CERA Performance Standard. So when we are looking at the ASM, which is a crucial part in the CERA Performance Standard, we are developing the first approach by bringing every party on one table. And we have the CERA body at the end, we have the organization which are working with the ASM operator, we have the ASM operator itself, we have the government and the financial sector which supports or can support the ASM operator. CERA will be working as a platform for all these different parties to bring them together or to support their working together. The first step by accepting the ASM sector within the CPS is that the ASM operator is in possession of the CERA Performance Standard, which is very unlikely because the ASM operators have no functional management system, they have no human resource manager, they have no safety manager, etc., etc. So this event is very unlikely. The second option is the ASM operator is in possession having the OECD due diligence implemented, which is more realistic than the first point. That means the ASM operator is working with the OECD due diligence guidelines, and then it will be accepted by controlling the ASM operator by CERA, within the CERA system and within the CERA Performance Standard. And the last one is that the ASM operator is working with approved organizations like Fairmind, and standard, and then this organization is CERA verified and can be worked on the platform of CERA with their ASM operator, or the ASM operator having some kind of ASM standards like the Fairmind standard, which I already mentioned here, and these standards are verified by CERA. So there are three different options right now that we have implemented right now. We are talking in one of our pilot project with an ASM operator or with an organization, and having also these ASM issues. So we are trying to implement this approach currently in practice, and having right now good results with the organization. Then when we are looking at the recycling part of the CPS, if an organization itself recycles raw materials or is using recycled raw materials and wants to be certified by CPS, it has to fulfill the three following conditions. We have on the right side the CERA Association The first option is that the recycling facility itself is certified with the CERA Performance Standard as a regular operation. So if you are a mine, if you are a processing plant, if you are a refiner, or if you are a recycling facility, you will be certified by the CIMD structure of the CERA Performance Standard, which is the very first option. The second option, if the organization using recycled materials, the supplier is subjected to the CPS theme supply chain due diligence. So if the organization is receiving recycling material, it needs to conduct a supply chain due diligence on their suppliers, like the supplier code of conduct. Or at the end, the supplier itself is CERA chain of custody certified. That means if a supplier is CERA chain of custody certified, the CERA knows exactly where the raw materials are coming from or not. But the CES is not part of the discussion today and will be explained in another specific webinar. Milestones and contact. We have right now different milestones achieved. So we started in 2017 with the development of the CERA certification scheme. In 2019, we compiled the basic paperwork of the manual of the CERA Performance Standard, as well as the first draft of the CERA Chain of Custody Standard. In the same year, we developed and elaborate the implementation details for cobalt and lithium. Right now, we are also having the implementation details or the content of the implementation details for copper and iron as well. We started in 2019 a pilot project in cobalt and lithium, as well as in this year a graphite and rare element pilot project. And our goal is to achieve or to establish the CERA association beginning in this year and ending in the next year. And this is more or less my last slide. I was a bit fast, but we have more time for questions right now. So you are welcome to become part of CERA. Join us as member from society, politic, institutions, or industry. Right now we have 4 pilot projects or pilot phases, but we are very open for further discussions about further pilot projects. Here you see our website, which is really new, and our traditional email. So thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. This was really interesting, and I'm looking forward to learn more about the practical application in our next webinar in January. During the course of the webinar, some questions appeared, and I would like to ask Nadine to read them out on behalf of the respective questionnaire.
Okay. So there was one question regarding the CERA software. So the question was, is there a plan in the calendar to incorporate other raw materials to the CERA software?
Yes, this is also a crucial aspect. So we started with our preferred minerals. We started with lithium, cobalt, iron, and copper. During the development, we also implemented to develop the implementation details for graphite and rare elements. And this CERA software is constructed to implement all other raw materials as well by time. So we are right now having these 4 preferred minerals, or the risk assessment for these 4 minerals in this database. And then we extended to the different raw materials which are coming in future. So at the end, this CERA software will be in years, a huge set of raw materials, or the risk assessment of specific raw materials at the end. But we started with this 4 preferred minerals to be very focused on this, and then extended to all raw materials by time.
Okay, thank you. Another question, which is probably already be answered, because this question was asked before you came to this topic in the presentation, was if CERA can be applied to all types of mines or only on large-scale mines?
Yes, we're starting our, right now I see the chat. We're starting with large scale mines and implement, but with one of our projects, in our Africa project, we're also having this topic with ASM. So the CERA Performance Standard is in the first line is the standard for large scale mines, but having a specific approach for ASM by including them in the CERA Performance Standard system, in the CERA system. So the CERA Performance Standard is industrial or large scale focus, but implementing the ASM software as well.
Yeah, maybe I could make an additional hint. It is not only large scale, that means it's not only for companies with thousands of people, it's also suitable for companies with a size of few dozen miners, for example. In our pilots, we try to bring a group of 4 pilots together, which are very different to each other. That means in one case, it's in the beginning of the development, in the other case, it is a very small company with only 30 persons there. In other cases, it's a very large company with thousands of people. And so the system is configured from the beginning on to fit in any size. That means it is suitable, especially for this ASM topic, as Lucas mentioned, as well for mid-size, smaller and large-size mining companies or processing plants.
Okay. A next question concerns the setup of CERA. So the question was, what can you say about the setup of the CERA organization, association, and CERA team?
Yeah, we are coming now into this phase where we have to look for these organizational issues. We will found this association in the very early months of the next year. That means we are talking about the first and second quarter of next year. And this association will be open for any kind of stakeholders. So everybody is welcome to be a part of it. And to explain a little bit, the CERA system is developed, for example, by us, by DMT here in this case, but we are together with, for example, TÜV Nord, as well as several European universities who are leading in their topics, for example, with fingerprinting or with supply chain analysis and things like that. But this development will be done and will give to an association which will be founded beginning of next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there is one other question. What is the estimated cost of the certification process? Is there any subsidy from the EU?
Yeah, this is a question which is not so easy to answer, because right now we are in the pilot phases and we are supporting the pilot candidates in a very very intensive level. And so we are calculating and looking for the cost just now. That means it will be in the range of an typical standard. That means it's comparable with the introduction of an ISO standard or something like that. But it's not possible to say in the moment how much it will be. The other part of the question was, is there a kind of support by the European community, for example? It depends. It depends, for example, in the situation in next year. As we have mentioned, this product CERA is developed by founding of EIT raw materials, and maybe it's possible to find a way in the future to organize another pilot phase or something like that. But this is open up to now. Okay,
so we have some time left for more questions. So if you like to ask a question, feel free to write it in the chat so we can answer it during this webinar. I have another question. So how is CERA different from other existing standards or other standards in development?
Yeah, this is a question what we Yeah, but we got a lot of time. So as I mentioned, we have 4 different standards within this system. We started the CERA Performance Standard, and within this field, the performance of different operations in place, there are a lot of standards, there are a lot of good standards, there are a lot of not so trustworthy standards. So the CERA Performance Standard in comparison, CERA Performance Standard as one standard in comparison to the other existing standards is that the CERA Performance Standard is kind of core standard, which is intended to use by also large-scale, mid-size, and small-scale mines. So we are wanting to building the core, the basis, the fundament for sustainability, and then proceed with high-level structure standards, with best available structures. We are in discussion with other standards as well to harmonize and cross-recognize each other. So this is a crucial point, especially within the CERA Performance Standard field, within the performance of the operation. But the difference is the whole CERA system at all. So we have 4 different standards which are all building on each other. That means if an exploration project started, can be certified by the CERA Readiness Standard, which is the basis for the CERA Performance Standard for sure. So we are following the whole mine life cycle from the greenfield to the end product or to the raw material with the CERA Readiness Standard, with the CERA Performance Standard. If the organization is looking also for, I want to trace my elements through the value chain, we can offer the CERA Chain of Custody Standard. And at the end, if the CERA Performance Standard and the CERA Chain of Custody Standard is fulfilled or is conducted, that means the processing of the raw material is certified and the traceability of the raw material is certified. It can be issued with the final label of CERA. So we're covering the value chain from the greenfield to the consumer. This is the very unique point from CERA, the 4-in-1 system. And this is the comparison to other certification schemes. But when we are looking back to the CERA Performance Standard, to the performance of operation, we're having this fundament and working with other standards to be conform, to harmonize with each other and support this process.
Thank you.
Then we had last time and within our webinar a question about the drivers of the different standards. So the CERA Performance Standard, the main driver is on the one hand the mine site, but on the other hand also the OEMs, which are wanted to having certified materials within their products. So within the CERA Performance Standard, we have the mine operator, we have the processing operator, the refiner or the smelter, and on the other hand, we have the OEMs, which are really interested in certified materials. When we are looking to the CERA Readiness Standard, we have more or less the financial sector, which is very interested in that. Is sustainable, that sustainability aspects will be fulfilled during the mine planning. And there are also, we're having EBRD within our advisory board. They are very interested for granting loans, that the mine plan is sustainable, that different requirements are met. When we are looking to the chain of custody standard, which is also very important for mine sites, as well as for OEMs as well, then to trace the elements through the value chain, to know exactly where's my source, where's my origin. I want to ensure that this raw material is not linked to child labor or forced labor or something like that. This is very crucial for the chain of custody and the drivers behind, or the drivers behind the chain of custody standard. And at the end, the final product standard, which is the label, which is like the fair trade logo on the final product, is very important for the consumers. So this is our final goal, to having the CERA label on the products, to guarantee that this raw material is sourced as well as traced in a responsible manner. And there we have the consumer, but also the OEMs. And I think the value chain actors has also a lot of interest interest in this final product. This belonging to the drivers of the standard. We have, yeah.
There was another question. It was a double question, so I answered only the first part, the question about the association, but there was a question about the CERA team, and I just mentioned a few partners, so I would like to answer it in a larger range. That means we are a European team for sure, but this standard is an international team. It's not located in Europe or only focused to Europe. It's an open worldwide standard. This is what thing I would like to say. And we have two other partners I would like to mention. This is RISE from Sweden. They are developing the software which is necessary to follow the material flow in the chain of custody standards. That means here we are using a combination of a blockchain and a traditional database solution because of the requirements which have to fulfill. This is one very necessary partner. Another partner is Confident from Spain, who are responsible in the development of the benchmarking to compare and to cross-recognize, to harmonize with other standards. We have I would say, kind of algorithm how to compare it in an objective and a fair way, the different standards to the CERA standard. I already mentioned the University of Leoben with this fingerprinting topic, the University of Leiden, and last but not least, if not CERT, who are very competent in developing schemes for certification. And at the end, there is LTO Business from Sweden, another partner.
Okay.
Maybe one question as well about the certification work. Who is conducting certification work in CERA? So I think parts of it we also described. We're having at the end the CERA Association at the end, which is the standard holder. We have the accreditation body, which accreditates the certification body. And the certification body is an independent third-party body, which is conducting the certification work. And we also have the independent consultants, which are giving support for organizations which are looking for certification. So we have this traditional third-party system, the traditional certification work with traditional third-party organizations, certification bodies, and the CERA team or the CERA Association is the standard holder, is conducting trainings, is responsible for the standard revision, etc., etc. So we have this third-party system in place for conducting certification work. When we are looking for example, for the exchange markets, so this is also a crucial point when we are looking at having certified materials in the value chain, which are certified by the CPS. We are also in discussion with exchange markets to guarantee that these certified materials are belonging or can be offered or can be bought at exchange markets. And this is also one goal of CERA, as well as we are every time looking at the OECD 5-step approach and the CERA Performance Standard. Next year, we will be looking at the self-assessment of OECD due diligence guidance to be comparable and conform with this guidance. Because in this regard, we're also having the new EU regulations 2021. So one big milestone in the next year will be recognized by OECD, by the OECD due diligence guidelines, conducting this self-assessment, this assessment process of the OECD due diligence guidance to be conform, and then supporting the implementation of the EU new regulations regarding conflict minerals. And this is one big milestone beside our continuous work within the harmonization process.
There's another question regarding the association. Will the association be financed through fees for certification?
Not only about this, it is a system which is powered by two aspects. One aspect is the member fee of the association, and the other aspect is the certification for itself. So that means the cost for certification will be used to do the certification, and the member fees and so on are used for further developments and revision and things like that.
Okay. Another question, maybe to Lucas. Is there a formal partnership with YBC, SD, UN, CRI, and other international frameworks?
Right now we are having EBRD with their requirement set within our advisory board. We have contacts to traditional standards owner like IRMA. We have contact with IRMA. We have contacts with governmental agency, which are doing a lot of guidelines, standard work. UN, it's really complicated to have a formal partnership with the UN. We are in contact with not GRI, ASB, but other certification systems, yes, to support the harmonization cross-recognition process.
Yes, if here I see UN is mentioned, we are in close contact with the UNECE.
Yeah, with the UNECE.
This is advisory board member, and the interest of UNECE is the pre-mining phase. That means the phase when a mining is developed, is financed, and the classification of the deposit will be done. And here is the focus of the UNECE.
There's another question regarding IRMA. You mentioned IRMA. What are the differences between CERA and IRMA?
This is a question which also regards to the previous question about what is the difference of CERA. So within the CERA Performance Standard, you have a lot of single topics through other sustainability standards. Regarding IRMA is the best available practice standard out there, which is for large scale. It is very complex, but not complex in a negative way. It's very complex and can be implemented by large scale mines. So it's a best available practice. CERA is working as a core criteria standard to having a set of sustainability standards or sustainability work in place. And then based on this, going further and further and further to achieve, for example, the IRMA best available practice standard. But this is an aspect that needs to be discussed and further developed. So the big difference between IRMA and CERA is that CERA is working as a core standard to guarantee that also small and mid-sized companies are working in IRMA.
Okay. There are still questions in the chat, but time is flying. If you are interested in much more information and further details about the work DMT and CERA is leading, please visit the website www.cera-standard.org. Please leave a message in the chat if you'd like to be contacted as well. Yeah, and we have the protocol and we'll get back to you. And please stay tuned. We will have our next CERA Performance Standard webinar in January, talking about the practical application. And that's it so far. Thank you very much for your participation, your interest in the standard, and I hope to see you here and meet you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.